And Representative Schlein touched on what the policy is at Keene State. The editorial states, as it stands, the current policy, students who are interested in holding a peaceful assembly, protest, or other gathering must go through the administrative process to get approved. Once approved, those students are allowed only to hold their peaceful assembly on the lawn outside of the student center. Well, Keene State College is a very large campus, fairly large. You know, there are definitely campuses that are larger. There's a lot of outside area at Keene State College, but they're basically telling people, no, you have to go stand in this one small little area that not everybody is going to necessarily pass through unless they're going into the student center or into the cafeteria. Maybe somebody wants to go do, you know, some literature pass out near campus housing, which is an open area and would be covered by HB477. Keene State College says, no, you're not allowed to do that. You can only do it with our permission in this one small area. And I'm glad that Representative Ladd mentioned HB 1516 or HB 1561 from last year. And this is a lot more narrowly tailored than 1561, where 1561 applied to everyone. HB 477 only applies to students. And I believe that it addresses some of the concerns that were brought by members of the committee about being overly broad. And specifically, HB 477 applies, again, only to students and only to speech that is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, as long as the speech does not substantially disrupt the functioning of the institution. Meaning that a student would not be allowed under this to stand up in the middle of class and give a monologue about something, because that would be disrupting the way the institution operates. And you can, again, see this lines 7 through 16 on page 1, and then it's reiterated as applying to the community college system as well. And again, this defines public forum as any open outdoor area on the campus of a university or college. So we're not talking about having something in the hallway of the student center. We're not talking about, you know, handing stuff out in the middle of the cafeteria. We're talking about in public forums, the outside areas, the campus quad, if you will, places that historically have been there for the purpose of free speech. One more thing, talking about Keene State College, where Representative Schlein had mentioned that the policy does allow where you can get a table inside the, I believe it's the student center. If you get a table, you are not allowed to step out from behind the table, and you cannot call out to people. So if somebody's walking down, you can't call out to let them know whatever it is that you're trying to distribute, or if it's a bake sale, you can't call out, hey, buy your cookies. You have to sit there quietly, and you can only speak if someone approaches your table. So it is very restrictive, and again, we don't know how many people are not seeking permission because they know that it's going to be overly restricted. So there's the seen versus the unseen here, and a lot of it you can't quantify. And I'll attempt to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Representative Miley?
Thank you. This does look different than the last bill last time.
Yes.
But there was an issue. I want to give you a situation and see how this situation now will apply to this bill. We talked about last time you were here a situation at graduation where the governor was there, was going to give a speech, and you had people who were protesting during the procession going into graduation. How does that, and the people who were doing that were disciplined for that, how does that situation relate to this bill right now?
That was not me that testified on that.
I'm not saying
and I'm not entirely familiar with the situation where there was a protest, but HB 477, again, it only applies to students. So if the people that were there protesting were not students, then they would not be covered
And if they
under.
were students,
If they were students, as long as it was not, and let me find the wording here, interfering with, I'm substantially disrupting the functioning of the institution. And I don't see how having a protest prior to a graduation ceremony would be construed to substantially disrupt the functioning of the institution. So I believe that people would have a right to protest, again, as long as it was in an outdoor open area of campus.
oh, okay.
Yes.
So, then we really get down to the issue of interpretation.
Everything's an issue of interpretation when it deals with free speech.
And the issue, the question here then, is what's reasonable? You talked about your, earlier testifying, talked about reasonableness. So it is the interpretation of what is reasonable, and I'm not sure how you can ultimately legislate reasonableness when it's based upon the interpretation of the individual who's trying to implement the particular policy.
Well, there are a lot of statutes right now that reference what a reasonable person would interpret something to mean. But again, yeah, it all comes down to interpretation, and we're probably going to interpret it slightly different than somebody else will.
Thank you.
Representative Britt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How they let you out of elections, Darrell? You've been there. You said when you stood up, I've got some examples of violations of free speech. But what you've given us is an evaluation of policies you found in the policy book. These are not examples.
If you read the articles, you should have gotten an article from the Keene State Equinox. You should have gotten 2 articles that reference some violations.
No, it was at the back of the, these were on the top and the other thing was on the back, at the back.
Yeah, what I passed down on this side, there was the single-page handout plus a 2-page that were stapled together, and then what I passed handing that way was the
We had
editorial.
a snag over here, sorry.
Ah, okay.
That is snag.
I got one. Who needs one?
Here.
Yes. Back in the day, when I was dean at the UNH, I used to approve student events in business school. What I found was that these our instructors would actually help the students find a better place to do what they wanted to do. I never questioned what they were doing when they were advertising, except the streakers back in.
Well, I'm happy to hear that you weren't discriminating based on the content of the message, because that would definitely be a blatant violation of free speech rights, as courts have consistently ruled that content-based restrictions are unconstitutional.
And not based on actual incidents, they're based on an interpretation of regulations and legal instruments.
And some of those regulations are a lot more restrictive than others. And if there's going to be a University of New Hampshire college system, then the policy should be consistent across the board. There should not be a case to where Keene State is a lot more restrictive on who can speak and when and where, and then Plymouth State allows more freedoms. So if there's going to be a college system, there should be consistent policies across the board. And I think the best way to handle this is through, a legislative process that says you are not allowed to restrict something that is not interfering with the proper functioning of the institution.
Further questions? I got a question. In regards to, it's the same on both sides, so I'll look on page 2, where it says, no institution within the community college system in New Hampshire which accepts state funds shall restrict the time, place. So then the question comes, through this legislation, can the university or community college system restrict one from not using a loudspeaker, for example?
Probably. I would have to, look at some of the examples in case law from other states where similar things of you cannot regulate time, place, manner. Virginia, I know, just recently passed something very similar that says that the campuses cannot pass restrictions that violate free speech rights. I don't know if that specifies you can't use a loudspeaker, because then that comes into noise pollution sort of things, and is there a city ordinance about certain amplification devices? But that's another question that's not related to, you have a right to distribute literature as long as you're outside and not disrupting the functioning of the college.
Thank you. Further questions? Thank you. Yes,
Oh, I'm
Representative.
sorry, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarification, do you represent Equinox? I didn't catch.
No. Sorry, I'm a lobbyist. I'm the CEO of Liberty Lobby LLC. I
Thank
just
you.
happen to live in Keene, so.
Okay, I just didn't know who you were with.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I got a copy of the Equinox when those came out, and unfortunately, I was not able to find enough copies to pass around, so I got the articles from online.